Have you ever been told by the person you love most that you're worth nothing? Have you ever looked into the mirror after everything fell apart and asked yourself, what's left of me? This is the story of Lindsay Lamb, a woman betrayed by her husband, handed a $5 bill and a cruel remark. This is what you're really worth. But instead of breaking, she took that very bill and built an entire fashion empire called Phoenix Rising, a place where every wound is stitched back together with light. A story of betrayal, courage, forgiveness, and rebirth stretching from New York to Paris, from ashes to glory. If you've ever fallen, been dismissed, or wanted to start again from zero, stay with us, because Lindsay's journey will make you believe. No one is born to burn, some are born to light up the world. If you love stories full of emotion and strength like this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. That night, the lights of the Plaza Hotel glittered like a golden crown above New York City. Limousines lined up before the grand entrance as guests stepped out, greeted by the flashing bursts of dozens of cameras. Lindsay Lamb stood at the edge of the ballroom, champagne glass in hand, smiling politely at people she no longer felt anything for. It was the Visionary of Fashion Awards, a title her husband had won 3 years in a row. Richard Peaton, the man who once made her heart race with his grand dreams, now stood on stage in a flawless tuxedo, lifting the crystal trophy like a king of the night. Applause thundered. The spotlight washed over his face, and Lindsay felt herself being swallowed by his glow. On the gold-embossed program, the name designer, Richard Peaton, shimmered. No one knew that the first sketches of that collection had come from her hands drawn at 3 a.m., under the dim light of a desk lamp beside a cold cup of coffee. No one knew she had convinced a small mill in Lyon to weave that special silk, or that she had negotiated with Bergdorf's to take a risk on those bold cuts. And now, there was only one name, Richard Peaton. He's brilliant, a woman beside her whispered. It was Victoria, the wife of a board member. You must be so proud, Lindsay. She smiled, the same practiced smile she'd worn for 10 years, the one that hid every crack inside her. I am, she said softly, her voice smooth as silk though her heart felt like lead. Across the ballroom, Richard stepped down from the stage. Beside him was Isabella Rodriguez, a 23-year-old model turned influencer, wearing the midnight blue gown Lindsay herself had designed. The young woman slipped her arm through his, laughing like a crystal bell. The gown was perfect. It shimmered like moonlight, dancing on water. So perfect it made Lindsay feel sick. Lindsay, she turned. Richard stood before her, eyes cold and proud. Congratulations, she said evenly. The collection is stunning. It is. His smile didn't reach his eyes. We need to talk. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. My office. The lawyer will be there. She froze. Lawyer? Our lawyer, he said, pressing the word as if to crush it. There are papers to sign. Isabella giggled. Richie, you promised we'd dance. I'll be right there, Richard murmured, then turned away, leaving Lindsay in the crowd. Music swelled. People danced. She stood still like a statue, and in that moment, Lindsay knew her marriage was truly over. That night, she didn't sleep. The room they once shared felt twice as cold. Sitting by the window, she scrolled through old photos, snapshots of what once looked like happiness. Richard smiling beside her at their first brand launch, late nights sketching on the floor together, his voice whispering, "We'll make something great, you and me." Now, there was only him. No more us. When dawn crept through the window, Lindsay dressed in a cream suit she had designed herself but never worn. It fit her perfectly like armor. Richard's office, located on the 47th floor of Manhattan, was vast and sterile, with glass walls that opened to the skyline. He was already seated at the desk, beside Bernard Shaw, his silver-haired lawyer with a razor-sharp smile. And, of course, Isabella scrolling her phone, looking bored. Sit down, Lindsay, Richard said, like a boss to an employee. Saturday, Bernard slid a folder across the desk. The prenuptial agreement you signed remains valid, he said smoothly. In the event of divorce, you receive no share of the company, no rights to intellectual property created during the marriage, and a one-time settlement of $50,000. Lindsay looked at the page's lines of cold text marching down the paper. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of work. Worth about one of your dresses, she murmured. The contract is legally binding, Bernard replied. It's fine, Lindsay said quietly. I'll sign. Richard raised an eyebrow, surprised. No fight? No argument? No. She smiled faintly. You want me gone quickly, don't you? She picked up the pen and signed, page after page, her hand steady. When she finished, she set the pen down and drew a long breath. That's it? She asked. Richard leaned back and pulled out his wallet. From it, he took a $5 bill and placed it on the table. Not quite. This is a bonus. Symbolic of your true worth. You were always the one behind the scenes, pretty when needed, quiet when told. I built this empire. You were just decoration. Isabella laughed. Oh my God, Richie, that's brutal. Lindsay stared at the bill, old, worn at the edges, lying in a shaft of daylight. She picked it up, held it to the light as if inspecting a gem. So this is all I'm worth? She asked softly. Exactly, Richard said smugly. You're nothing without me. She folded the bill neatly, slipped it into her wallet, and looked at him with unnerving calm. You're right about one thing, Richard, she said, voice light as air. I used to fear the spotlight. I thought I was meant to stand behind you, but today I've learned even fools can learn fast. She rose, grabbed her bag, and walked out. The click of her heels on the wooden floor echoed like the toll of an ending era. Behind her, Richard frowned. Something in her eyes had unsettled him, though he didn't yet know why. The elevator slid down to the lobby, reflecting Lindsay's face in the polished glass. No tears, only silence. She felt as if she were falling, yet strangely, she wasn't afraid. Outside, New York roared on. Cars honked, people hurried. The world didn't care that one woman had just been discarded, but inside her, something was waking, not hope, but purposeful fury. She stepped into the cold March wind, her coat billowing. Inside her wallet, the $5 bill burned like a spark. She pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. Zara answered on the second ring. Lynn? God, you sound like you've just survived a war. Not yet, Lindsay said with a faint laugh. But it's coming. Don't tell me. He threw me a $5 bill and said that's all I'm worth. Silence. Then Zara let out a bitter laugh. Perfect. Then take that bill, Lindsay. Take it and make him beg for forgiveness. No forgiveness, Lindsay said, her voice low. I don't need him to kneel. I need him to see me standing somewhere he'll never reach. A gust of wind tangled her hair. Zara, she said quietly, I need a place to stay. And I need to relearn everything about vintage fashion, the market, online sales, all of it. What are you planning? To do what he thinks I can't. To turn these $5 into something he can never buy. She hung up. Sunlight broke through the clouds, touching her face, and for the first time in months, Lindsay smiled. That afternoon, she packed her life into 2 suitcases. 10 years of love, labor, and loss, reduced to a few clothes, sketchbooks, and that folded $5 bill. The penthouse that once echoed with laughter was now silent. She locked the door behind her, leaving the past inside, and carried one promise. He will remember my name not as his ex-wife, but as the woman who took everything he thought he owned. The subway carried her to Brooklyn, as sunset painted the city in amber and violet. Zara met her at the door of a small loft filled with fabric, paper, and warm golden light. Welcome home, fallen queen, Zara teased gently. My throne's already burned, Lindsay replied, setting down her bags. Now we rebuild, but this time, no one sits beside me. Zara handed her a cup of tea. So, what's the plan? Lindsay pulled out the $5 bill and placed it on the table. It starts here. How? The only way I know, by creating beauty out of what others throw away. The 2 women locked eyes, a mix of pain and determination. Outside, the hum of traffic rose like the heartbeat of the city, pulsing in time with hers. Night fell. Lindsay opened her old laptop, searching for thrift stores around Brooklyn. One name caught her eye. Second Chance Thrift Store. She smiled. Fitting name. The next morning, Lindsay woke early, tied her hair back, slipped into a simple white shirt, and held the $5 bill in her hand. You're really going shopping with that? Zara mumbled sleepily. Not just shopping, Lindsay said. I'm starting a new life with it. Stepping out into the morning light, she paused under the trees as sunlight scattered through the leaves like tiny mirrors. On the sidewalk, she opened her wallet and looked at the bill. A flimsy piece of paper, yet inside it burned her humiliation, pride, and vow. You said this is all I'm worth, she whispered. Then let's see, Richard. How much these $5 will cost you? She folded it, tucked it away, and walked on, blending into the rhythm of New York, where among millions of fleeting stories, one had just begun. A story that would change the world of fashion forever. The little loft in Brooklyn sat tucked between two old buildings, its brick walls worn and its tall windows filmed with dust. Every time the subway rumbled by, the whole room trembled slightly, as if the city's heartbeat pulsed in rhythm with the two women starting over inside. Lindsay sat by the window. In front of her lay the $5 bill, now pressed between two thin sheets of plastic, beside an old sewing machine Zara had bought at a flea market for $30. Morning light streamed through the glass, falling on the bill, making it shimmer a small flame in a faded space. Zara yawned as she poured coffee. So what are you going to do with that thing? Hang it on the wall or trade it for a box of needles? Lindsay took a sip of the lukewarm coffee. I'll keep it right here, she said softly. So every time I want to quit, I'll remember why I started. She set the cup down and gazed out the window where sunlight poured in at an angle. Outside, the city rushed on as if nothing had changed, but inside her, everything had. No longer the woman in her husband's shadow, the one backstage helping someone else shine. Now she was herself, broke, but free. Their first day began with Zara dragging Lindsay out of the house, insisting she walk through the thrift markets along Bedford Avenue. They strolled past rows of stores with signs that read thrift store, vintage shop, and second chance. Brooklyn's where old dreams come to be reborn, Zara muttered. Who knows, maybe I'm walking next to the next fashion legend. You sound like a movie, Lindsay said with a small laugh. Well, your life's already cinematic enough. Lindsay smiled but stayed quiet. A trace of bitterness still lingered. Every laugh from Zara reminded her of those glittering nights in Manhattan, the parties, the camera flashes, the whispers in her ear. You're the soul of my work. Now that the soul had to learn to survive on its own. The Second Chance thrift store sat quietly on a street corner between a nail salon and a Mexican cafe. Behind the counter was an older woman with silver hair, chewing gum and reading the paper. What can I help you find, honey? I'm looking for something that tells a story, Lindsay said. The woman looked up, raising a brow. A story, huh? Well, down the last aisle, there are some old jackets. One of them still has a label from the 80 Seconds fine fabric, too. Lindsay walked deeper into the shop. The smell of old cloth, dust, and memory filled the air. She ran her fingers along the racks, each fold, each texture like a remnant of someone else's life. Then she saw it, a charcoal grey blazer, classically cut, brass buttons scratched with time, but the silhouette is perfect. A price tag written in red ink, $4. Lindsay smiled. This one, she whispered. Zara frowned. That beat-up thing? What are you going to do with it? Redefine the meaning of $5. She paid, receiving $1 in change, a fragile note resting in her palm like a sign from the universe. That afternoon, Lindsay sat by the sewing machine, carefully unpicking every seam as if performing surgery. Sunlight from the window caught her focused face, calm yet fierce. Zara sipped her coffee, grinning. You know, if a camera were filming this, people on YouTube would be bawling right now. Then film it, Lindsay said without looking up. So when we sell our first piece, I'll have proof it all started here. That night, Lindsay didn't sleep. The click of the sewing machine blended with the wind outside. She stitched, cut, reshaped, and replaced each old button with a new one. By 3 a.m., the blazer had transformed. Its shoulders were softer, the collar curved, and it featured a black satin lining with a violet sheen. She slipped it on. It fit perfectly. Her reflection glowed back at her, alive. Zara, half asleep against the wall, blinked. Oh my God, you just turned that rag into something people in Soho would pay $100 for. No, Lindsay said firmly. 200. Her voice carried such certainty that Zara burst out laughing. The next morning, they photographed the blazer in natural light and posted it on a new Etsy page, Phoenix Rising Studio. Beneath the photo, Lindsay typed a short description, a story reborn from ashes, handcrafted from a $5 dream. Then they waited. An hour passed. 2, 5, no views. Zara sighed. Maybe you should add some hashtags. Or buy ads. It's okay, Lindsay said, smiling faintly. Everything beautiful takes time to be seen. That night, as they ate instant noodles, Lindsay's phone buzzed. A tiny notification appeared. Item sold. $200. Zara screamed, nearly spilling her bowl. Holy crap, Lindsay. $200. Who bought it? Lindsay looked at the screen. The name read, Eleanor Reed, stylist at Vogue Online. She went quiet for a moment, then laughed. See, Zara? The $5 just paid off. Zara hugged her tight, laughing through tears. The subway roared past again, shaking the windows, but this time, the sound felt like applause from the city itself. 3 days later, Lindsay's inbox overflowed. Eleanor Reed had posted a photo on Instagram, wearing the reborn blazer, captioned, "Fashion isn't just clothing, it's a story. And I just found a beautiful one from Brooklyn." The post hit 10,000 likes overnight. Phoenix Rising began circulating through small fashion forums focused on sustainable design. Zara ran around the apartment, yelling, laughing, "Lindsay, we're blowing up. They're asking for prices. New designs, they're even asking who you are." But Lindsay stayed at her sewing machine, eyes on the fabric. "I don't just want to go viral," she said quietly. "I want to prove that $5 can become a whole philosophy." Zara shook her head, smiling. "You never know how to stop, do you?" And that's precisely what set Lindsay apart. Days turned into nights. The apartment became a tiny workshop, piles of fabric in the corners, spools of thread spilling over the table, the desk lamp burning past midnight. Lindsay sourced discarded materials from factories, outdated garments, even old hotel curtains, transforming them into one-of-a-kind designs that blended vintage soul with modern grace. New York's fashion circles began referring to the style as reclaimed elegance. Zara handled the rest: photos, posts, customers. 2 women, 1 designer, 1 muse, working, laughing, surviving through each overdue bill. One night, Zara asked, "If Richard ever sees this, what would you do?" Lindsay paused, staring out the window at the glittering skyline. "Nothing," she said. "I just want him to know that when he hears the name Phoenix Rising, he'll realize he lost the most valuable thing he ever had." Zara said nothing. She knew deep down that Lindsay's wound hadn't healed. But instead of bleeding, it had become fuel, a fierce light no one could extinguish. One morning, Lindsay's phone rang. A woman's voice came through. "Hello, this is Diane Thornhill, creative director at Maison Beaumont. I want to invite you to our Sustainable Vision exhibition next week. I think the world needs to hear your story." Lindsay froze. Maison Beaumont is one of the top luxury retail chains in America. She met Zara's wide eyes. I'll be there," Lindsay said, her voice trembling. After the call, she sat in silence, looking at the $5 bill framed on the desk. $5, Zara," she whispered. "It's leading the way." Zara grinned. "You're a witch, Lindsay. A witch of fashion and fate." A week later, they arrived at the exhibition. The room was spacious and softly lit, its white walls lined with collections from renowned designers. At the far corner stood a mannequin draped in a charcoal grey blazer, Lindsay's first creation. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Rebirth, designed by Lindsay Lamb, Phoenix Rising Studio." People stopped. They looked. Some took photos. Some just stood quietly. Diane approached and shook Lindsay's hand. "I've seen dozens of recycled fashion brands," she said, "but your story touched me the most. If you agree, I'd like to distribute Phoenix Rising through our stores in New York and San Francisco." Lindsay could hardly believe her ears. She nodded, eyes glistening. "Thank you. But there's one more thing," she said softly. "Someday, I want to take this brand to Paris." Diane smiled. "You will. Some people are born to fall so that they can learn how to fly." That night, back in Brooklyn, Lindsay and Zara stood on the rooftop, gazing at the glowing city below. The wind carried the scent of smoke and pizza through the air. "Zara," Lindsay said quietly, "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this, that $5 bill isn't a symbol of humiliation anymore. It's a reminder that no one gets to put a price on a woman's worth." Zara wrapped an arm around her. "And my Phoenix," she said, smiling, "is finally spreading her wings." Lindsay chuckled softly. "Not yet. She's just opened her eyes." Above Brooklyn, a few faint stars flickered. Below, the city lights shimmered in the windows of that small loft where a $5 dream had become the first spark of a fire, destined to set the fashion world ablaze. June in New York blazed with life. Summer had arrived, bringing with it the quickened pulse of a city that never slept. On the 3rd floor of an old Brooklyn building, The hum of a sewing machine, the snip of scissors, and the soft rhythm of jazz from a Bluetooth speaker filled the air day and night. Lindsay Lamb, the woman once humiliated with a $5 bill, was bent over her table, finishing her 30th jacket. Every stitch, every small detail breathed her longing. To be seen, to be recognized, to be herself finally. On the wall above her desk hung a small wooden sign Zara had painted in white. Phoenix Rising, from ashes to art. That name had become their soul, a brand without an office, without even an official logo, but with something money could never buy: meaning. Since being featured on Maison Beaumont's New Voices of Fashion list, everything had moved like a whirlwind. Articles, interviews, messages, collaborations all coming at once, but Lindsay refused to be swept away. "We're not there yet," she told Zara one late night as they packed their last shipment. "All this is still fragile. One mistake, and it could disappear." Zara laughed, tying her hair up. "You really don't know how to enjoy a win, do you? They say the phoenix needs fire, not worry. And if the fire burns its wings, then we grow new ones." That answer made Lindsay laugh, a rare sound in the chaos of their days. They launched an Instagram account for the brand. Within 2 months, the number of followers grew from a few hundred to over 50,000. Short clips showing Lindsay turning discarded fabrics into luxury pieces spread like wildfire on TikTok. Hotel curtains reborn into gowns, old military jackets transformed into runway outerwear. The New York fashion scene started calling her the Queen of Rebirth. One morning, Zara burst into the studio, waving her iPad. "Lindsay, you have to see this." On the front page of Vogue Online was the headline, "From $5 to Fire. How a Broken Marriage Sparked a Fashion Revolution." The article recounted her story, the woman betrayed, who chose not to seek revenge but instead reinvent herself. It read, "Phoenix Rising isn't just a brand. It's a metaphor for the power of women who dare to be reborn." At the end, a quote from Lindsay stood out in bold. "I don't need to destroy my past. I need to build something better on top of its ashes." Zara wiped away tears. Lindsay said nothing, her hand tightening around her coffee cup until it went cold. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just felt a quiet pride rising within her, steady, grounded, unstoppable. That afternoon, a call came from Giovanni Ferrero, a renowned Italian fabric supplier. "Signora Lamb," his deep voice rolled through the line. "I once worked with Richard Piton. However, I now wish to work with you. You possess what he never had, a soul in every thread." When she hung up, Lindsay met Zara's gaze. "He's going to hear about this. And then what? He'll lose his mind." "Good," Zara smirked. "The madder he gets, the faster he burns." Late one night, Lindsay sat by the window, gazing out at the distant glow of Manhattan. That city had once witnessed her fall. Now, its light no longer frightened her. Her phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. "I saw your work. It's extraordinary. CD." She frowned. "CD?" Zara peeked over her shoulder. "Charlie Dean, the sustainable business investor. He backed Beaumont. Remember? Maybe it's just politeness. Or maybe it's the start of something." Lindsay didn't reply. The city lights reflected in her eyes, small fires flickering to life. Weeks later, Phoenix Rising debuted its first mini collection. Ashes, silk. Only 12 pieces, but each told a story of something once discarded. A coat from the hotel curtains, a dress made from parachute fabric, a blouse from a duvet cover. The show took place on the rooftop of their old building. Zara walked the runway herself as the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting a golden glow across the reborn garments. When the music stopped, the small crowd of stylists, journalists, and bloggers rose to their feet. Some even wiped away tears. No one could believe it all began with $5 and an insult. Lindsay stood tall, drawing in the evening air. The wind from the East River swept through her hair, and she knew, at that very moment, the phoenix had truly spread its wings. The next morning, headlines flooded the internet. "Phoenix Rising, the soul of rebirth. The woman who turned $5 into $1 million dream." Lindsay's Instagram followers jumped to 200,000 inches 2 days. Big fashion houses sent offers. TV networks reached out for interviews. Zara grinned nervously. "You're becoming famous, Lindsay. Which also means you're becoming someone's target." "You mean Richard? He won't stay quiet. You know that better than anyone. Lindsay turned toward the oak frame on her desk, the $5 bill still sealed inside. I'm not afraid, she said softly. That bill once burned me. Now, it's the fire that keeps me alive. That afternoon, an email arrived. Miss Lamb, I'd like to meet you. Charlie Dean. They met at a small cafe in Soho, which was filled with natural light and featured exposed brick walls. Charlie arrived in a beige linen suit, wearing a warm smile and calm eyes. I love how you see the world, he said as soon as they sat down. Old, torn, forgotten fabrics, yet you find stories in them. I see the same thing, and I believe the world needs more people like you. You want to collaborate? Lindsay asked, composed. No, he said. I want to invest, not in your company, in you. She froze. For a fleeting second, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in any man since Richard. Unconditional belief. They talked for hours about fashion, philosophy, sustainability, and how beauty could heal what was broken. When they parted, Charlie said only, You don't need to decide now, but if you ever want to take Phoenix Rising global, I'll be there. The following months passed more quickly than Lindsay could have imagined. Phoenix Rising expanded into a studio 3 times larger, hired staff, and opened online stores across Europe. One night, Zara looked at the mountain of orders and sighed. We need a PR team, Lindsay. You can't keep carrying this alone. I just don't want to lose what made us start, Lindsay said. I don't want Phoenix Rising to turn into something soulless. Then keep it soul, Zara said gently, but let it have wings. That made Lindsay laugh through her exhaustion. As always, Zara knew just what to say. One day, while walking through Times Square, Lindsay stopped in her tracks. On a massive LED screen, a Phoenix Rising video was playing. There she was cutting fabric, stitching seams, her voice narrating, We rise, not to burn others, but to shine brighter than the fire that broke us. People paused, filmed, whispered. Zara stood beside her, eyes shining. You're standing in the square where people once looked down on you. No, Lindsay said with a calm smile. I'm standing among people who believe in themselves because of this story. That night, in her new apartment, white walls, warm golden light, Lindsay sat at her desk. The framed $5 bill rested before her. Beneath it, she wrote in black marker, Don't forget who lit the fire. Zara glanced over and asked softly, Do you think you'll ever forgive Richard? Yes, Lindsay said, but not yet. Forgiveness takes strength and I'm still building mine, one day at a time. She turned to the window, Manhattan gleaming in the distance. I don't want revenge. I want to live a life that makes him look back and see what he lost. Zara nodded. And you are, Lindsay. You're flying. Night settled. Lindsay began writing thank you notes to her first customers, each word sincere, each line filled with warmth. She didn't yet know that within weeks, she'd appear on national television, and when the whole world learned the story of Phoenix Rising, the actual battle with her past would finally begin. That morning, New York lay beneath a sky heavy with gray clouds. From the glass window of Beaumont Studios' 15th floor, Lindsay gazed down at the restless river of people on Madison Avenue, yellow taxis flashing, neon signs blinking, the honking of horns forming the endless rhythm of the city. She held a cup of coffee but couldn't bring herself to take a sip. On the desk before her lay the script for that evening's talk show, The Morning Sphere, America's biggest morning show. Below the title, in bold letters, Special guest, Lindsay Lamb, founder of Phoenix Rising. Zara, sitting nearby, fluffed up her curls, eyeing her friend. First time on national TV, and you're this calm? At least pretend to be nervous, you'll make the rest of us feel human. Lindsay smiled faintly. I've already survived the day someone threw a $5 bill in my face, Zara. No camera can scare me more than that. Fair, Zara chuckled. Just, maybe don't turn the interview into a live fashion industry takedown, okay? No, Lindsay said softly. Today isn't about revenge, it's about truth. Inside NBC's makeup room, Lindsay sat before the mirror. The lights framed her reflection eyes that had seen countless sleepless nights, yet still gleamed with something undefinable. Serenity and fire, all at once. The makeup artist, Tasha, a poised black woman with a calm voice, dabbed on foundation and said, You're different from most people who sit here. They come to promote something. You look like you came to finish something. Lindsay smiled. You're right. To finish and to begin again. Moments later, the show's host, Melissa Gray, entered. "Lindsay, we're thrilled to have you. Your story's everywhere. I'll be honest, millions of women will be watching your every word tonight." "Then I'll speak from my heart," Lindsay said. When the studio lights flared to life and the theme music began to play, the audience erupted in applause. Lindsay walked out, poised in a simple beige dress, elegant, understated, radiant. Melissa began, "Phoenix Rising has become a global phenomenon in just 6 months. But what truly moves people isn't just your fashion, it's your story. What made you start over?" Lindsay took a slow breath, smiling gently. "What made me start again was a $5 bill." Laughter rippled through the audience until they saw she wasn't joking. "I was married to a powerful man in fashion. I loved him. I gave him everything, my ideas, my designs, my faith. When it ended, he threw a $5 bill at me and said, 'This is your real worth.'" The studio fell silent. Melissa leaned forward, eyes wide. "You're saying—" "Yes," Lindsay said calmly. "Richard Peton, the man the world calls a creative icon, built his empire on the backs of women like me, women whose work he stole. But I'm not here to talk about pain. I'm here to talk about what I built from it." She took the $5 bill from her wallet and held it up to the camera. The studio lights caught it, making it shimmer like a shard of glass. "This is where it all began. I bought a thrifted jacket for $4, used the last dollar to buy thread, and sold that jacket for $200. Today, Phoenix Rising exists in over 20 countries, employing hundreds of women who were once forgotten." Applause thundered through the studio, but Lindsay's voice stayed steady, calm, grounded. "I'm not sharing this to humiliate anyone. I'm sharing it to remind people that no one has the right to put a price tag on a human being. And if someone ever tries, turn that pain into your fire." Melissa nodded, visibly moved. "Lindsay, if Richard Peton is watching this right now, what would you say to him?" Lindsay looked directly into the camera, her gaze so composed that the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "I'd say, thank you, because without your betrayal, Phoenix Rising wouldn't exist. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the only way to be reborn is to let yourself burn." The crowd exploded in applause. Melissa reached out, gripping Lindsay's hand. "That line is going to be remembered." That night, the interview swept across social media like wildfire. Hashtags $5 Queen and Phoenix Rising trended within hours. Headlines blazed across every major outlet. "Lindsay Lamb exposes the truth behind Peton luxury." Online, thousands of women commented, "Her story is our story. No one gets to define a woman's worth. From ashes, we rise." Meanwhile, in a luxurious Manhattan penthouse, Richard Peton hurled his glass of wine against the wall. The shatter rang through the silence. Isabella Rodriguez flinched near the door, frightened. "She humiliated me," Richard snarled. He turned to the screen, replaying Lindsay's calm face, her hand holding up that $5 bill. In that instant, he realized what he had truly lost, not his reputation, but his power over the story. The next morning, Lindsay's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, brands, networks, collaboration requests all flooding in. Zara, acting as her impromptu assistant, juggled calls, emails, and press inquiries. "You just turned morning TV into a revolution," she said, laughing between bites of toast. "People are calling you a feminist icon." "I don't want to be an icon," Lindsay said quietly, gazing out the window. "I just want to prove I'm not worthless, not like he said." She had never sought the noise, but this time, the noise was necessary. Days later, an envelope arrived embossed with gold letters. "We are honored to invite Lindsay Lamb, Phoenix Rising, as a guest designer at Paris Fashion Week." Zara screamed, "Paris! Lindsay, this is it. You've made it." Lindsay gripped the letter, her heart pounding with both excitement and unease. Paris, the city where Richard once declared, "No one but me will ever belong there." She smiled faintly. Then it's time to break that curse. A few days later, at the Beaumont headquarters, Lindsay walked into a meeting and froze. Sitting across the table was Charlie Dean. He rose, smiling with quiet confidence. "I hear you made the world listen," he said. "Now let's make sure they never forget." "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Beaumont partners with my company Dean Ethica," he replied. "I'm offering full partnership. I'll invest the capital, and you'll have complete creative control. Phoenix Rising needs to prepare for Paris." "Why me?" she asked softly. Because you did what the rest of the world only dreams of, you told the truth. He met her eyes, voice low. And because I believe anyone who's been destroyed and still dares to rise will never fail. For a brief moment, something unspoken flickered between them, something beyond business, beyond strategy. That night, they signed the deal. Charlie raised his glass. To Phoenix Rising, may the Phoenix finally take flight. Lindsay clinked her glass, smiling, and may no one ever forget that it was born from $5. From across the room, Zara smirked, half teasing, half serious. Careful, Lindsay. Sometimes the one who helps you fly is the one you fall for. They laughed, but in Lindsay's eyes, a quiet spark had already been lit. Days later, an anonymous email appeared in her inbox. Don't think you've won. Paris will be your end. No name, no address, but Lindsay knew. Richard. She stared at the message, then deleted it. No anger, no fear, only one thought. If Paris is a battlefield, I'll walk into it wearing my finest dress. On her last night in New York before the flight, Lindsay stood before the framed $5 bill. Zara was asleep. The apartment was quiet. Rain fell outside, tracing silver lines down the glass. Lindsay whispered, barely audible, tomorrow, I'll stand on the world's stage and you'll see. But what you'll never understand, Richard, is that I don't need you to shine. I am the light. Outside, the city breathed beneath the rain. The droplets slid down the window like 1,000 old memories washing away. In that hush, Lindsay closed her eyes. The most significant storm of her life was coming, but this time, she wouldn't run. She would walk straight into it, head held high. Paris, the city of light, of art, of love, and for Lindsay Lamb, the battlefield of her rebirth. When the plane touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport, she lifted her gaze toward the silver-grey sky outside. Beside her, Zara was already filming a story for Phoenix Rising's social channel, her voice bubbling with excitement. We've landed in Paris. Get ready for the wildest chapter in fashion history. Lindsay smiled, pulling up her coat collar. Paris has no idea it's about to catch fire. Zara grinned. Correction, the Phoenix doesn't burn. It shines. Remember? The Beaumont car took them straight to Le Meurice Hotel, where designers for Paris Fashion Week were staying. As Lindsay stepped into the lobby, she saw dozens of familiar faces, people who once sided with Richard Peaton. Now they watched her with a mix of curiosity and unease. But Lindsay no longer bowed her head. She walked past them, calm and unbothered in a white linen coat and simple black heels. Her composure silenced the whispers before they could spread. In a small conference room at Beaumont, Charlie Dean was waiting. He looked just as he had in New York, composed, elegant, but with something softer in his eyes this time. Welcome to Paris, Lindsay, he said, his voice low and steady. You've got half the fashion world on edge, and the other half, they're afraid. Lindsay smiled, taking her seat. Charlie opened his laptop, pulling up plans. Phoenix Rising will showcase 12 looks. I've secured the rooftop of the Palais de Tokyo overlooking the Seine, an open-air runway, natural light, and guests close enough to touch the designs. I want them to feel your work, not just see it. That sounds bold, she said, one brow raised. You're not someone who plays it safe. I can see that in your eyes. Lindsay laughed softly. You observe people too closely, Mr. Dean. I run businesses, he replied, smiling. But first, I study people. And what do you see in me? A woman with nothing left to lose and therefore unstoppable. For a moment, Lindsay was silent. He was right. She had lost everything, and because of that, she feared nothing. The following days blurred into motion. Mornings were for stage meetings, afternoons for production crews, and nights for stitching under lamplight. Lindsay and Zara spent hours perfecting each piece, checking every seam. Charlie was always there, never intruding, but always present. Sometimes he brought coffee. Sometimes he just stood nearby, a quiet reassurance that she wasn't alone. One late night, Lindsay sat alone, adjusting the final gown Rebirth. The door opened softly. Charlie entered, carrying 2 small cups of espresso. I knew you'd still be awake, he said, setting one beside her. You don't look like someone who sleeps much. You're right, she smiled. This dress, it has to be perfect. It's the closing piece, the end of the $5 story. Charlie sat opposite her, eyes filled with quiet admiration. Do you ever worry that when everything becomes perfect, people will forget why you started? She looked up. I'm not afraid of being forgotten. I'm afraid of forgetting who made me who I am. The desk lamp threw half her face in light, half in shadow, strength and vulnerability intertwined. Charlie's voice lowered. Some people were born to be loved, he said, but the world forced them to fight instead. I hope someday you get to be loved the right way. Lindsay didn't answer at first. His words touched something deep inside her, a string that hadn't been played in years. Then she smiled softly. Don't worry. I'm still learning how to love myself. The next morning, breaking news spread like wildfire. Penniless Luxury had announced its own runway show same day, same time as Phoenix Rising. Zara nearly screamed when she saw it. He's lost his mind. 2 shows at once? How's anyone supposed to choose? We're not changing our time, Lindsay said firmly. I'm not avoiding him. I'm facing him. Charlie nodded. Good. There's only one way to end this, not by dodging the fire, but by outshining it. That evening, they stood together on the hotel rooftop, the Eiffel Tower glittering in the distance. You know, Lindsay said softly, I used to think of him every time I thought of Paris, but now I think of me. Charlie looked at her. Good, because you deserve a Paris that belongs to you. 3 days to the show. The studio buzzed like a storm. Fabric deliveries, fittings, lighting tests. No one slept. Then one morning, Zara burst into the room, pale-faced, phone in hand. Bad news. One of our fabric suppliers just backed out. Richard pressured them. They're afraid to lose his contracts. Lindsay took a deep breath. How much material do we have left? Enough for 8 looks. Then we'll make the last 4 from scraps. Phoenix Rising was born from what others threw away. It'll stay true to that. As they argued over options, Charlie entered. I'll handle the rest, he said calmly. You focus on creation. What are you going to do? Lindsay asked. Convince them not with power, but with respect. That afternoon, he met with the suppliers, his voice steady, his words deliberate. You've chosen power before. This time, select soul. One day, you'll be proud to say you stood on the right side. 2 days later, the materials arrived right on schedule. When the final bolts of fabric were unpacked, Zara threw her arms around Charlie. You're a miracle in human form. He laughed. No, I believe in people who deserve it. The night before the rehearsal, Lindsay sat alone in the empty venue, the stage lights casting a pale glow over her. Charlie walked in quietly, carrying 2 glasses of wine. To Rebirth, he said, offering her one. To fire, she replied. The clink of glass echoed softly, the sound of something beginning. He set his glass down and looked at her. Lindsay, he said carefully, I didn't just invest in your company. I believed in you. And, maybe, I'm starting to believe in something more. She turned to him, their faces only inches apart. You mean? Maybe love. Lindsay let out a faint laugh, though her voice trembled. Charlie, I don't know if I can love again. I lost myself once in love. I can't risk that twice. No one loves the same way twice, he said gently. If the first broke you, the second will teach you how to stand. Silence lingered. Only the wind moved through the open windows, carrying the cool breath of Paris into the room. Lindsay lowered her eyes, whispering, I need time. I have forever, he said with a kind smile. The next morning, the press exploded. Penniless Luxury versus Phoenix Rising, the showdown of the century. The world waited to see who would rise higher. But for Lindsay, this was no longer a battle between brands. It was between 2 souls, one that had destroyed her, and one that had helped her rise. Backstage, the air buzzed with nerves and heat steamers hissing, heels clacking, models rushing. Zara turned to her. Are you scared? Yes, Lindsay said, smiling calmly. But fear is just another form of energy and I know how to use it. She glanced toward Charlie across the room, reviewing stage plans. Their eyes met, and that was enough. The Phoenix was ready. The fire was set. And Paris, the city that had witnessed centuries of legends, was about to see another one born. That morning in Paris was colder than usual. Mist clung to the rooftops, and the sky looked like an unfinished canvas, grey and restless. Lindsay Lamb opened the window of her hotel suite, breathing in the crisp air as the Seine drifted quietly below. 2 days left. 2 days until Phoenix Rising's debut. 2 days to close a 10-year wound. Zara entered, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. Did you sleep at all last night? No, Lindsay said, eyes still on the river. But I've never felt more awake. Zara smiled. Good. Because we're about to wake the world with you. That afternoon, the entire team gathered inside the Palais de Tokyo, a cathedral of glass and light overlooking the Seine. Stage lights shimmered, minimalist sets gleamed with quiet sophistication, perfectly in tune with Lindsay's aesthetic. Charlie stood at the center, directing the crew. You want the audience seated as close as possible? Yes, Lindsay said. I want them to feel the fabric's breath, hear the whisper of cloth against air. Fashion isn't a stage, it's a heartbeat. Charlie nodded. You're doing something no one's dared to do before. Then it's worth doing, she replied. What's never been done always leaves a mark. Just as things were coming together, bad news hit like a blade. Zara burst in, pale. Lindsay Richard just announced his show. Same day, same time, same district. The room fell silent. Charlie frowned. He's trying to steal the press. If both shows happen at once, the media will split. No, Lindsay said calmly. They'll choose the one that tells the truth. Zara looked at her, half worried, half in awe. You're insane. Maybe, Lindsay said with a faint smile. But insanity is the only way to survive among the fake. That evening, Richard Petton held a press conference. In a black suit and dark glasses, he spoke smoothly into the microphones. Petton Luxury has always led innovation, he said. I hear someone's trying to imitate us here in Paris. I wish them luck copies never outshine the original. The line hit every headline. Social media exploded. Petton vs Lamb, Phoenix rising Paris. Half the world took sides. Everyone waited to see whose flame would burn brighter. That night, Lindsay sat alone in the studio, surrounded by her designs. Charlie entered quietly, carrying a bottle of red wine. He poured 2 glasses and handed her one. Do you ever think, she asked softly, that we're walking into a war we can't win? You're wrong, Charlie said. This isn't a war to win. It's a journey to survive. Lindsay ran a fingertip around the rim of her glass. You know, she murmured. When I was with Richard, I thought I couldn't live without him. But losing him made me more alive than I ever was. That's why I believe in you, Charlie replied, because you're not proving yourself to anyone, only to your own soul. They sat there quietly, the rain tapping gently on the glass roof above. Outside, Paris prepared for a show. Inside, 2 hearts beat with the rhythm of unspoken faith, the kind that holds people together in silent wars. Show day, 9 a.m. The Palais de Tokyo buzzed like a hive. Models, stylists, photographers, everyone running, shouting, rushing. Outside, cameras lined the steps. Phoenix rising Paris trended worldwide before the first light cue. Lindsay stood backstage in a crisp white shirt and black trousers, her hair tied neatly in a bun. Zara approached, fastening a button. You know, she said, you don't look like a designer right now. You look like a general. That's because I am, Lindsay replied softly. And I don't intend to lose on my own battlefield. Charlie appeared beside them, handing her a folded paper. The guest list, he said. A few names from the International Fashion Council. They want to meet you after the show. Thank you, she said, taking it. One more thing, he added quietly. Richard's team is spreading rumors claiming Phoenix Rising copied Petton designs. He's paid influencers to push it. Lindsay closed her eyes briefly. He's still the same. Doesn't know how to win with honor. Do you want me to handle it? No, she said. Let me answer him my way. The lights dimmed. The crowd hushed. The music began an electronic symphony woven with the hum of sewing machines and the rip of fabric, the sound of rebirth. The first model stepped onto the runway, a gown made from recycled hotel curtains. Then came a trench coat from old military nylon, a lace dress stitched from discarded bedding, a shirt shaped like wings unfolding. The audience held its breath. No one spoke. No flashes, only silence and heartbeats. Zara stood at the wings, fists clenched. Charlie watched from the other side, eyes fixed on the stage, and Lindsay, backstage, watched the feed on a small monitor, her expression unreadable. Then the final piece, Rebirth. A pure white gown made from reclaimed silk and hundreds of fragments of vintage lace, all hand-stitched. Every seam was a scar. Every scar had become art. As the model turned, the lights hit just right. The fabric shimmered like a phoenix spreading its wings in flame. The audience rose to their feet. Applause thundered. Some wept. Across town, at Petton Luxury's show, the seats were half empty. People whispered only one name: Phoenix Rising. Richard hurled his microphone to the floor. "She stole my spotlight," he roared. But no one listened. No one cared anymore. After the show, Lindsay walked onto the stage. The lights bathed her face in gold. She bowed deeply, no crown, no bouquet, just the folded $5 bill in her hand. She held it tightly, a vow wrapped in paper. Charlie joined her silently. Zara, in the front row, wiped away tears. Lindsay looked up, her voice clear and steady. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for believing that even something small, a $5 bill, can buy faith, courage, and a dream." The hall erupted in applause. Light surrounded her until the world forgot the man who once called her worthless. Lindsay Lamb, Phoenix Rising, had won the only way she knew how, by turning pain into light. That night, after everyone left, Lindsay stayed alone on the empty runway. Charlie approached, handing her the morning's newspaper. On the front page was her photo, mid-bow beneath the headline: "The Queen rises from the ashes." She looked at it for a long time, then said quietly, "This war isn't over." "No," Charlie said, "but you've won the first battle." She turned to him. "And if I lose, then I'll still be here." Outside, Paris sparkled thousands of tiny fires across the city. On the runway floor, Lindsay took a few steps forward, her heels clicking softly. The sound was steady, sure the rhythm of a queen leaving her battlefield, needing no crown to prove she had conquered. Paris, the night after the show. The city still shimmered with the afterglow of Phoenix Rising. Lindsay Lamb's name was everywhere: Vogue, Elle, Harper's Bazaar, the woman who turned a $5 bill into a symbol of global fashion. But when the lights faded, the applause faded into memory, and the hall fell silent. Lindsay sat alone by her hotel window, watching the Eiffel Tower glitter in the distance. Zara slept soundly in the other bed. Charlie, the man who had stood beside her through the fiercest storm, had gone back to his room. The suite was quiet, the warm lamplight falling across her face, reflecting off the framed $5 bill on the wall. The Rebirth gown now hung in the Beaumont Gallery, valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars. But to Lindsay, it was only another shape of pain, beauty born from fire. She closed her eyes. Victory still didn't feel like peace. Inside, there was a hollow space that applause could never fill. 2 days later, Charlie knocked on her door. He stood there in a white shirt, holding a cappuccino and a croissant. "Good morning, Your Majesty," he said, smiling with that steady warmth. "You bring breakfast to my room now?" "Not every day I get to share breakfast with the woman who just rewrote fashion history." She laughed softly for the first time in days. They sat by the window, watching the Seine drift under pale morning light. "So," Charlie asked, "what's next?" "Back to New York," she said. "Build a bigger studio. Expand the team. And Paris?" "Paris is a milestone, not a home." He paused, then spoke gently. "You're always moving forward, Lindsay. But sometimes, it's okay to stop and notice who's walking beside you." She turned to him. Their eyes met. For a moment, the world went quiet. There was something in his gaze that made her heart skip warmth and danger. "Are you talking about yourself?" she asked. "Maybe." They said nothing more. Paris hummed beyond the glass, but between them, silence spoke louder. That night, Charlie invited her to the rooftop bar of the hotel, a quiet spot overlooking the city. The wind was soft, jazz drifted in the background, and golden lights shimmered across the skyline. They stood by the railing, wineglasses in hand. After a long pause, Charlie said, "I've been around you long enough to know you're strong, so strong that people forget you were ever hurt." She turned slightly. "And you think you know me?" "I don't know everything," he said, "but I'd like to learn piece by piece." Her voice came out rougher than she expected. "That sounds like a confession." "It is." She froze. The Eiffel Tower lights flickered across her eyes, bright, trembling, alive. Charlie set his glass down and took a small step closer. "You don't have to be strong with me, Lindsay. I'm not here to save you. I want to walk beside you." She stepped back half an inch, her pulse quickening. "You don't understand. I've loved before and I disappeared in that love. I can't lose myself again." He stayed still, voice low and calm. "You don't have to disappear to be loved. You have to be you. The rest, let me handle." For a heartbeat, something deep inside her stirred. A locked door creaked open, but fear swept in right after, cold and sharp. She turned away, whispering, "I'm sorry, Charlie. I'm not ready. He nodded, no disappointment, only understanding. I know, and I'll wait. Then he smiled, faint but warm, like candlelight resisting the wind. Just know this, someone out there believes in you, not out of pity, not for gain, but because he loves you. He left quietly, the echo of his footsteps fading into the Paris night. Lindsay stood alone, watching the city lights blur through her tears, not knowing if she cried from fear or from the realization that her heart had begun to beat for someone again. The next morning, Zara noticed something had changed. Lindsay spoke little, but her eyes were deeper. Something happened last night, Zara asked. Nothing, Lindsay said softly. Only, someone told me love doesn't mean losing yourself. Charlie? Lindsay didn't answer, which was answer enough. Zara smiled gently. You know, I've seen you fight the whole world. But maybe now, it's time to fight yourself to let someone in. That sounds easy when it's not your heart. Lindsay laughed lightly. I'm terrified, Zara. Of what? Of trusting the wrong person again. Of loving and losing everything again. Zara took her hand. If you're scared of love, you'll never really live. Lindsay went quiet. Outside, morning sunlight bathed the rooftops of Paris. Maybe, she whispered. It's time I learned to live, not just survive. A week later, they returned to New York. Phoenix Rising exploded worldwide. Covers, interview, partnerships, Beaumont's expansion deal sent shares soaring. But Lindsay stayed the same. She worked late, staying until the last at the studio, surrounded by fabric and quiet. Sometimes, Charlie stopped by with coffee, saying nothing. Their silence had changed. It no longer felt heavy. It felt safe. One night, while reviewing new sketches, Charlie said, You know, Lindsay, some people come into our lives to teach us forgiveness. I think Richard was that person for you. Forgive him? She said, with a trace of bitterness. Do you know what he took from me? I do, he said. But if you don't forgive, you'll still be living in his story, not your own. His words lingered long after he left. That night, Lindsay went home. Her new apartment in Brooklyn was larger now, but she'd kept a small corner for the framed $5 bill. She sat before it for a long while. Richard, she whispered, I thought I'd hate you forever, but maybe I should thank you. Because losing you taught me how to stand alone. She smiled faintly, and for the first time, there was no anger left, only peace. A few days later, Charlie invited her to the rooftop of Dean Ethica, the place he went when he needed to think. The New York night glittered like an ocean of stars. He waited with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Wine again, she teased. This time, not a confession, he said, eyes glinting. Just gratitude for teaching me how to believe. They clinked glasses. No more words. They just stood side by side, watching the city that had once broken her now shine beneath her name. Sometimes, love doesn't need to be spoken, it just needs to be felt. And in that luminous night, Lindsay realized she was no longer afraid of love. Not because she needed it, but because she finally trusted herself to receive it. When they said goodnight, Charlie took her hand gently. I won't rush you, he said, but I'm not leaving. Lindsay smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. All right, just let me come to you in my own rhythm. Later, at home, she opened the frame of the $5 bill and slipped a note beside it, Charlie's handwriting. No one was born to burn, Lindsay. Some were born to light up the world. She stared at the words, a warmth blooming quietly in her chest. Outside, rain began to fall soft against the window, reflecting the glow of New York's lights. The phoenix inside her no longer burned to survive. Now, it burned because it had finally learned to love. 8 months after Paris Fashion Week, winter had wrapped New York in cold silver light. The wind hissed through the tall windows of Phoenix Rising's new Brooklyn studio, a vast, sunlit space scented with fresh fabric and hope. Sewing machines hummed in rhythm. Golden light spread across rolls of silk like a quiet fire. Lindsay walked down the corridor, notebook in hand. Every time she passed, the words painted on the wall, Phoenix Rising, made from courage, warmth rose in her chest. Inside her office, Charlie waited with that familiar, calm smile. You know, he said, if I didn't see it myself, I wouldn't believe this empire started from $5. And 1 insult, Lindsay replied, smiling. Yes, he chuckled. And somehow, that insult became the first brick of a kingdom. They laughed, but there was a gentleness between them now, something more profound than business, quieter than confession. Phoenix Rising was everywhere. Time magazine had just named her the woman who redefined fashion. But Lindsay wasn't done. She was preparing for her most incredible show yet. The Reign of the Phoenix, to debut back in Paris, where everything began. Zara was the creative co-director. Charlie handled finance and strategy. Everything was falling perfectly into place. Until one stormy night, the phone rang. Zara's voice crackled with panic. "Lindsay, we've got a problem." "What happened?" "The entire Phoenix Rising shipment, the designs for the Paris show, has been held at Le Havre port. No explanation, just legal complications." Lindsay froze. "How long?" "An hour ago. I've called everyone, no one's taking responsibility." Charlie entered just as she hung up, eyes sharp. "Who manages the logistics company?" Zara hesitated. "The same one Peyton Luxury uses." No one spoke, but his name filled the silence like smoke. Richard Peyton. 2 hours later, Charlie got confirmation from France. The Phoenix Rising containers had been seized under a claim of intellectual property infringement. An anonymous complaint, complete with forged proof, accused Lindsay of copying Peyton Luxury's designs. Lindsay gripped her coffee cup so hard it shook. "He really won't stop." "And he never will," Charlie said quietly. "Because he can't stand that you exist. What do we do?" "I'm flying to France tonight," he said firmly. "I'll meet the port officials myself. Whatever it costs, I'll make sure those containers are released." "Charlie, you don't have to." "I do." His voice cut through the air, steady and unshakable. "This isn't business anymore. It's an honor." She met his eyes, tears, threatening. "You've done enough. Don't lose everything because of me." He shook his head. "I'm not doing it for you, Lindsay. I'm doing it with you." That night, the plane took off into the rain. Lindsay stayed behind, pacing the studio while memories of that first humiliation, the $5 bill, replayed in her mind. She had built a world from that pain, and now, one lie could destroy it. Zara sat nearby, anxious. "Do you think he can fix it?" Lindsay stared out the window, watching the city lights blur in the rain. "He won't fix it," she said softly. "He'll fight it." 2 days later, a message arrived at 3 a.m. 7 words only. "The shipment will arrive, but I lost everything." Her heart stopped. She called, no answer. By morning, an email came from Dean Ethica. "Due to unauthorized personal expenditure covering Phoenix Rising's legal guarantee, Mr. Charlie Dean is temporarily suspended from his executive position pending investigation." Zara read it aloud, her voice breaking. "Oh my God. He sacrificed everything for you." Lindsay sank into her chair. No tears, just a breath that trembled like glass. She realized Charlie had staked his entire career, his reputation, his fortune to protect her dream. 2 days later, the containers reached Paris. The designs were intact, the show would go on. But Charlie wasn't there. He remained in France, suspended, his accounts frozen. The night before the show, Lindsay sat alone in the Paris studio, surrounded by shimmering garments that seemed to glow under the soft light. Zara was nearby, quiet. "Zara," Lindsay said softly, "I used to think success meant standing alone at the top. But now, all I feel up here is cold." Zara looked at her gently. "You love him, don't you?" Lindsay smiled faintly. "I don't know. I know that when he's silent, the world feels too loud." Late that night, the door creaked open. Charlie stood there exhausted, unshaven, eyes shadowed with sleepless nights. Lindsay rushed over. "God, what have you done to yourself?" "Saved our collection," he said with a weary smile, "and lost another battle." "You lost the company?" "Yeah, but I don't regret it. If I had to choose between money and you, I'd still choose you." Lindsay froze, tears spilling. "You're a fool, Charlie." "Maybe, but the kind of fool I chose to be." She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. In that instant, the noise of the world vanished, only their heartbeats remained. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying when everyone else left." He held her tighter, voice rough. "I love you, that's all." She closed her eyes, tears tracing her cheeks, not from pain, but from a kind of peace she'd never known. For the first time, she felt safe in someone's arms, not because he was powerful, but because his love asked for nothing. They worked through the night. The hum of sewing machines blended with soft music. Charlie watched as Lindsay stitched the final hem, his eyes bright with quiet awe. Near dawn, when the last dress was done, she turned to him. "Tomorrow, We'll walk onto the world's stage together. He smiled. And if the world turns away, then we'll build another one. Morning light spilled through the tall windows, washing them both in gold. Lindsay gazed outside and whispered, "Tomorrow, the Phoenix retakes flight." Charlie nodded. "And this time," he said softly, "it won't fly to avenge, it'll fly to love." Paris morning of the Rain premiere. The night's rain had just faded, leaving the city slick with gold as sunlight touched the cobblestones. Outside the Palais Garnier, the crowd pressed in, cameras flashing, banners reading Phoenix Rising stretched across the square. This wasn't just a fashion show, it was history waiting to be written. Backstage, Lindsay stood amid rows of glowing gowns. Assistants rushed, brushes and pins in hand, fabric rustling like wings. Zara clasped her friend's hand. "You've come farther than anyone I know. Today don't be afraid." Lindsay squeezed back, her voice steady. "I'm not. I feel calm. Strangely calm." "Calm?" Zara asked, surprised. "Yes. Maybe because this time, I'm not here to prove anything." She looked into the mirror. The reflection staring back wasn't the woman who had once been abandoned in New York. It was a queen reborn. Behind her, Charlie appeared, stopping a few steps away. "Beautiful," he murmured. "The dress or me?" "Both." He smiled, soft and sure. The music began. Silence fell over the audience. The curtains parted and the rain began. This wasn't a declaration of war. It was a declaration of selfhood. Each design told a story of weakness, of hurt, of rising, of radiance. The soundtrack wasn't music at all, but a collage of breaths, sewing machines, and wind threading through fabric the sound of lives once forgotten. From the wings, Lindsay watched, her eyes shimmering under the stage lights. Charlie stood beside her. "You know," he whispered, "I've never seen anyone turn pain into art the way you do." She smiled faintly, her gaze fixed on the runway. "Pain is the strongest fabric, Charlie. It never fades." Then came the finale. The last model appeared in a gown of pure white, stitched from thousands of tiny fabric shards. Across its chest, a single red seam ran down like a healed scar. When the music stopped, the lights burst to full. The audience rose. Thunderous applause. Some cried. Others stood still, silent, overwhelmed. Lindsay walked out, bowing under the blinding glow. From the front row, Charlie smiled. Zara wiped her tears. But in the shadows, one man watched Richard Peton. His face was gaunt, unshaven, his arrogance dulled by exhaustion. When Lindsay lifted her head, their eyes met. For one long heartbeat, the world went still. After the show, when the hall emptied, Lindsay stayed behind. She slipped off her heels and sat on the catwalk floor, surrounded by scraps of fabric and quiet light. Footsteps echoed. Richard stepped into view. "Impressive," he said softly. "You've learned to perform well." Lindsay turned, calm as glass. "I wasn't performing. I was living." "Really?" His tone was sharp. "Were those tears out there real? Or just pity you've learned to sell?" "Richard," she said gently, "you still think everything is theater, don't you?" He didn't answer at first. Then his voice dropped. "You made the world see you as the victim and me as the villain. But don't forget, without me, no one would know your name." She stood, walking toward him slowly until only an arm's length separated them. "No, Richard. Without you, I'd still be me. I just would have arrived sooner. You didn't create me. You were only the fire that burned away the parts I'd outgrown." He gave a shaky laugh. "You really have changed." "No," she said. "I just remembered who I was." She opened her purse and took out the same $5 bill, frayed and fading with time. She placed it in his hand. "You once told me this was my true worth." He looked down. His fingers trembled. She spoke softly, like the wind. "Now I'm giving it back because today, I carry no one's price but my own." Richard stood frozen, gripping the bill. The hall was silent but for their breathing. "Lindsay," he whispered, his voice breaking, "I was wrong." "You weren't wrong for wanting success," she said evenly. "You were wrong to think you had to crush people to get it." His eyes glistened. "I've lost everything, the company, the fame, the friends. Are you happy now?" "No," she replied. "I don't feel joy watching someone I once dreamed with fall apart. I feel tired." He gave a rough, hollow laugh. "Still kind, aren't you?" She shook her head gently. "Not kind, just done. Forgiveness isn't mercy, Richard. It's freedom." She turned to leave. "Lindsay," he called softly, voice unsteady. "Did you ever really love me?" She stopped. The Eiffel Tower glimmered faintly through the rain-streaked window. "Yes," she said. "That was the truest thing in all our lives. But love can't save someone who refuses to be saved." Her heels clicked against the runway, each step sealing a chapter shut. Behind her, Richard sank into a chair, tears slipping quietly down his face. The $5 bill in his hand blurred with rain and regret. Outside, rain began again, light and steady. Charlie waited by the back exit, holding an umbrella. When Lindsay stepped out, he said nothing, just lifted it over her head. "It's done," she murmured. "Yeah," he said, "and you're still standing." They walked side by side down the slick Paris street. The rain fell like a lullaby. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think victory meant watching him fall. But now, I think victory is realizing I don't need that anymore." Charlie smiled. "That's when you're truly free." Later that night, back at the hotel, Zara turned on the TV. Footage of the show filled the screen, the audience standing, Lindsay bowing, light pouring over her. The headline read, "Phoenix Rising, When Forgiveness Became Fashion." Lindsay watched the screen, then looked out the window at the city glowing like a sea of stars. "Forgiveness as fashion?" Zara teased. "Maybe," Lindsay said with a smile, "because nothing's more beautiful than a soul that's healed." Charlie entered, holding an envelope. "This just came from the International Fashion Council." Lindsay opened it. Inside was an invitation naming her an honorary member, a title reserved for those who redefine humanity through design. She laughed softly. "Who would have thought $5 could lead me here?" Charlie met her eyes, pride shimmering in his voice. "It didn't. You did because you refused to let it define you." Later that night, Lindsay stepped onto the balcony, gazing down at the lights of Paris. She took out another $5 bill, crisp, new, untouched, and laid it beside the invitation on the table. Then she wrote a single line across it. "The cost of underestimating a queen. Everything." She placed it in a wooden frame beside the old one. One past laid to rest, one reign begun. Outside, Paris glowed brighter, and within her, the fire had quieted. Not gone, just transformed into light. 1 year after the rain, Paris had changed seasons. Flowers lined the Champs Élysées. Vintage cars rolled slowly over wet cobblestones, and the spring wind carried the scent of coffee and warm bread. At the new headquarters of Phoenix Rising in the old Marais district, Lindsay Lamb stepped through the glass doors. A bronze plaque gleamed at the entrance. "Phoenix Rising, from ashes, we build light." She's still dressed in a white shirt, black pants, and her hair tied up, but inside, everything had changed. No more anger, no more fear, only gratitude even for the pain that once broke her. Upstairs, Zara was reviewing posters for their newest collection. "Look at this, Lindsay, the crown. I swear, this one's going to make people cry." Lindsay smiled. "You like the name?" "Perfect," Zara said. "Because a crown isn't meant for the head, it's meant for the heart." Lindsay looked at the sketches. Gowns made from thousands of fabric fragments, each a different shade of light. "We've come so far," she whispered. "Yeah," Zara said. "From that tiny loft in Brooklyn to Paris, from $5 to millions of dreams. And from a woman who was broken," Lindsay added softly, "to a woman who finally knows how to love." That afternoon, Charlie Dean arrived. He had returned to Dean Ethica not as CEO, but as an independent advisor for ethical business. He looked lighter, freer, as if he too had shed the armor of his old world. "You're always busy," he said, handing her 2 cups of chamomile tea. "And you," she smiled. "I thought you'd forgotten Paris." "Impossible. It's where I found myself again." They laughed, sitting by the window overlooking the street. "Ever think about it?" he asked. "All this, starting from a $5 bill?" "All the time," she said. "But I don't look at it with anger anymore. It's just a piece of paper and a lesson." "What lesson?" "That sometimes, to find your worth, you have to hit the bottom." That evening, they attended the opening of a special fashion exhibit titled "The Phoenix, From Pain to Power." The room shimmered in soft white light. At the center, on a glass pedestal, stood the Rebirth gown, the design that had changed Lindsay's life. Beside it, under a small glass frame, lay the original $5 bill. The caption read, "The Seed of a Legend." Visitors stood in silence. Some wiped away tears. Charlie turned to Lindsay, his voice low.
You turned humiliation into a symbol of strength. That's something almost no one can do. She smiled gently. No one's meant to burn forever. At some point, we're supposed to become light. The next day, Vogue interviewed her. Lindsay, if you could speak to the version of yourself from 10 years ago, the woman who'd just been betrayed and left with $5, what would you tell her? Lindsay paused, then smiled. I'd tell her, don't be afraid.
One day, you'll thank this pain because it'll teach you how to love without needing to be loved back. That night, they walked across the Bir Hakeim Bridge, where the Seine reflected the soft gold of Paris lights. The breeze was calm. The city hummed like a lullaby for souls that had once been shattered. Charlie took her hand. You know, he said, I used to think you didn't need anyone, but now I know even a phoenix needs somewhere to rest its wings. She looked at him, smiling.
And you? Aren't you afraid to love someone who's been through fire? He shook his head. No, because you taught me how to love with light, not with flames. She leaned in and kissed him gentle, like a promise. A kiss long overdue, yet perfectly timed to end every storm. 3 months later, New York. Under warm golden lights, The Crown debuted on an open-air stage. No red carpets, no extravagant theatrics, only wind, violin, and truth. The audience sat in a circle around the runway. At the center, Lindsay stepped forward, no gown, no jewels, no crown, just a white shirt, black pants, and a pair of scissors. She cut strips of leftover fabric and pieced them together into the shape of a crown. This crown, she said into the microphone, is not for those who win, but for those who never gave up. The room went silent. Then she placed the crown at the center of the floor and bowed. Charlie rose first, clapping. Then Zara. And then the whole audience, their applause warm and endless, like summer rain on an old tin roof. That night, they returned to the small Brooklyn apartment where it all began. The brick walls, the wooden table, the window facing the same quiet street. On the wall hung the old $5 frame, and beside it now, another frame, a piece of fabric from Rebirth, and her honorary certificate from the Fashion Council. Lindsay stood before them, smiling softly. You know, she said, this isn't a symbol of pain anymore. It's a reminder that no matter how far we go, we always start with something small. Charlie stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her. And that small thing, he whispered, built the whole world you see now. A week later, headlines flooded every major magazine. Phoenix rising, the new face of compassionate fashion. Lindsay Lamb and the age of human-centered design. From $5 to a crown, the woman who reborn the world. But Lindsay no longer chased titles. She chose to slow down, to live, to laugh, to love. With Charlie, with Zara, with her team, the people who helped her turn fire into light. One early summer morning, Lindsay walked along the East River. The breeze was soft, and sunlight danced on the water. She looked toward the horizon and whispered to herself, at last, I'm not running anymore, I'm just flying. She smiled, quiet, serene. No more proving, no more fighting. Because the woman who once burned had become the light itself. And in that light, Lindsay Lamb, the Phoenix Queen, finally found what she had been seeking all along. Peace. Thank you for walking beside Lindsay through these 10 chapters, from betrayal to rebirth, from ashes to the crown. Maybe, somewhere in her story, you saw a glimpse of your own. If it touched your heart, share your thoughts. Your story might be the light that guides someone else. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories of healing, love, and the courage to rise again. Until next time, another story, another heartbeat still pulsing with faith.